Okay, so my last rambling video was about the economics of insurgency, the disposability of the insurgent, skewed public perception, etc. I wasn't able to cover everything in the first video, so I was like, let's make part 2, Assassinations and Funding. When people think of an intelligence agency, one of the things that comes to mind is an assassination, and they picture an expensive James Bond-esque specialist being sent to take out a target. But this method is not the standard modus operandi for several reasons, including public perception. Picture this. You have a government you want to weaken. You could maybe assassinate someone, but what are the benefits and risks associated compared to bankrolling rebel groups? The general public has little understanding of the finances of terrorism or insurgency, and there's little public backlash to throwing money at rebel groups, and also little public interest. The few that are interested are partially comprised of conspiracy nuts too busy telling people Ebola is a depopulation agent to actually settle down and sort things out. So you could influence a government by funding their enemies, and it's fairly low risk compared to assassinations. With assassination, there's an enormous number of things that can go wrong. If an American strike team were captured, killed, or in some major way failed a hit, that's something that could wind up all over the news, create a huge scandal all over Twitter, the whole social media burrito. Add the expenses. You have to give a strike team or agent potentially millions in equipment and training, even if you give them top-of-the-line prototype gear. Like, let's say we successfully produce a cloaking device that works by bending the light around the person to give something close to real invisibility. How much is the R&D for that gonna cost? Probably billions. Worse is the risk of the capture of the equipment or malfunction of it. Even if both go smooth, a proper hit can be botched by completely random factors. Suppose, for example, you insert a sniper to a position. You know it's not a body double or decoy. You know it's the right target. You spent billions building and testing the cloaking device for the sniper. You spent millions in surveillance expenses to verify the target. The sniper's in position, staking out for the scheduled hit in the next couple of days. And the sniper has a heart attack, because humans are machines of meat that break down all the time. Which is one of the reasons sniper teams comprise more than one person usually, but for the sake of example, let's say you could only have one agent due to one cloak prototype. Not only is the hit incomplete, you need to do a recovery operation to hopefully save the agent, or at least prevent his equipment from being captured, and he probably can't move to an extraction point mid-heart attack. Or a random occurrence calls the target away from the kill zone. Or some guy goes into the building the sniper is in search of shade, and trips a claymore at the wrong time. This isn't even factoring in the issues of the body double or other defensive shenanigans, or the potential disposability of the target. Completely random factors are just that much of a risk. And they all have $50 million down the drain and a political scandal written all over them. So isn't it so much more appealing to use the drone strike system, despite the sloppiness, when it's cheaper and considered less liable? Especially if the targets are replaceable. Or what about tossing $20 million at a few rebel groups that don't like the guy you don't like for virtually no public backlash? They'll probably get all the blame for whatever happens to the region. It may not be discovered where their funds are from, and even if it is, people often don't care. How many have really bothered to track the money for ISIS? Come on, the tanks and rockets aren't growing on trees. Funding someone that happens to be the enemy of someone you don't like is considered a safer investment politically. In terms of public reaction, it's treated as if destabilizing a region and the related consequences are the more ethical course, because the more careful the action to avoid collateral damage, the more prone to controversy and outrage it is, so why bother? Whether they comprehend this or not, the general public prefers funding rebels to drone strikes, and drone strikes to precise assassination or capture, by virtue of their reactions. Think about it. If I were running for office and advocated research to improve knockout gas and make it safer than it is presently, or otherwise using similar chemicals to enhance capture operations and reduce collateral damage, then during election I'd be hit with countless attack ads stating I was in favor of biochemical weapons, with nerve gas, anthrax, and Ebola pictures in the background. I'd lose my shot at election faster than Rick Perry's anti-gay video. The Western public despises the idea of cleaner capture operations, and they'll crucify anyone in favor of lower collateral damage. They just don't seem to understand that's what they're doing. It's one of the reasons I'd like to improve public education in regard to this sort of thing, so people could be more careful what they wish for. Especially if people don't pay attention when things are handled through third-party intermediaries. That's the way most agencies like to be, out of sight and mind. It's also why the NSA goes Mr. Grumpy Gills when groups like Anonymous involve themselves and do a takedown of ISIS social media stuff. Random civvies are perceived as getting in the way and doing more harm than good. The agencies want the socials open in case a target cuts corners and ends up providing actionable info. The vigilante will argue, "You're not doing much, so we're taking down their stuff and disrupting their recruitment." The agency will say, "We are doing much, we just can't release what we're doing to the public." And it's sort of a back and forth since you can't entirely prove either argument. Surveillance is most effective on targets that don't know they're being watched and repeatedly make amateur mistakes, because if they don't know an organization is doing anything, they habitually cut corners when defending against threats they don't perceive to exist. Much of the useful information obtained from spying is going to be by preying on a target's ineptitude. They see the vigilante as a disruption to this, partially because they believe it will provoke the opponent to start taking more precautions and be harder to track. If I were to contact some ISIS guy with a claim of joining, but intent of horridly sabotaging, and the NSA read the messages, the data analyst would be thinking, "Oh no, who's this guy? Is he going to be ridiculous and post all over Twitter about how he got into ISIS and tipped them off from boasting? Does he intend to scuttle properly? Or is he actually joining them?" Keep in mind, there are people in the Western world that are going out of their way to join, and if I'm actually blending in properly, he'll have a hell of a time verifying my innocence. If I were to do sabotage, doing so properly involves slowly inserting yourself and then making it look like you had no involvement and pawning the blame off on other people. Conveniently joke to someone paranoid about someone else maybe planning to betray while secretly planting evidence, that sort of thing. And if you're any good, you'll give the poor data analyst a right headache trying to figure out which side you're on as he meticulously slogs through your browser history and deviant porn preferences. Worse is the risk of friendly fire, which is enormous for spying. I may inadvertently find a spy and throw him under the bus in my process of causing general chaos and disruption on anyone I think is too competent, without someone to tell me not to, since that sort of activity requires making a lot of decisions on the fly, and I frame him for something. Or the same could happen to me, with the NSA unable to discern what's going on inside my mind and only able to read messages. And if you're not any good, you'll screw up and cause a security jump, so they view it as a headache either way. But vigilante groups may perceive, for example, recruitment methods offered by social media to be a more prime target, and so it comes down to speculative interpretations of partially secret evidence. Has that painted a clearer picture or made things more convoluted? I don't know. Here's another cat picture in case it didn't. Hopefully it helped. Yeah, I'm still on painkillers. See you next time.